Let's see. I was told that nobody really wants to reveal for whom they voted yesterday, and I can understand that. You're doing business in this community. If you want to, you can. But I thought that we'd go around and talk politics this morning and what it means to your business now. We've got a new race on our hands where we can sort of whittle it down. But more to the point, we had a number of these candidates come through here, the Mid-Michigan Business Rep. You got to meet them. You got to talk with them on the air and off the air. And so I thought maybe we would just sort of review those candidates who came through here, if that makes sense to you. Let's start with Congressman Pete Hoekstra, the Republican from West Michigan, who was the last candidate to come through. What were your impressions of Hoekstra, and why do you think he didn't win?
This Peggy Doty here. To tell you the truth, I was not real impressed with Pete Hoekstra in the debates or any of the other opportunities I had to hear him until he came on this show. And quite frankly, that was a great experience for me because I got to meet 4 of the 7 candidates. And I thought he seemed real, and too often the ads you see on television are so stilted, and it just I was very impressed with him. I thought he was sincere and honest, and quite frankly, I thought he would do better. If you listen to all the polls, I'm never going to listen to the polls again.
Right. Well, and I would add to that what impressed me about Pete were 2 things. First of all, he has a belief, as Rick Schneider does, is to get government out of the way of business, which is absolutely critical. But the second thing is that I was impressed with the fact that he went out and he was doing these jobs that the normal Michigan citizenry does do on an occasion, and he was doing an hour here, 2 hours there, and he was getting a feel for this. Mm-hmm. Now, he had been in Washington for 15, 18 years or whatever,
he's going to need one
out of touch.
He's going to need one of those jobs maybe now.
Well, that's correct, but I was impressed with the fact that he would go and do that to learn, get a perspective of what's going on in the state of Michigan. That was excellent. I thought that was an excellent way of doing it.
Was his campaign too low energy? I mean, at the TV commercials, I thought, frankly, were very flat.
Probably. I mean, he didn't win, so there was something missing.
Second place.
Yeah, but there was something missing. And do I think it was energy? If I had to give you a quick one, I'd say it's probably because he didn't spend as much money as Mr. Schneider did.
No. $6 million stuff to compete with.
I mean, that's a lot of dough.
I mean, Hoekstra's a guy who sleeps on his couch in Washington rather than get an apartment.
Classic guy from Holland.
Yeah.
Well, Michael Patrick, you mentioned energy. I was listening to Mr. Bernero this morning, and having had Mr. Snyder here in the studio and seeing the ads and sort of the general theme that he was trying to carry through with his campaign, I think this is going to be a very interesting, to put it mildly, campaign for the next few months, because you really, at least from appearances initially, have sort of polar opposites in terms of how they try to get their message across, and it's going to be interesting to see what eventually carries the day.
Well, what they're going to do when they get to be elected. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road, and you're absolutely right. You did 2 different opposite poles, absolutely. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, some people will argue now that Rick Snyder will have a big, fat learning curve. I mean, you could ask him what happens in your office on day 1, and first he's got to find out where the bathroom is, right? And then if you take the Lansing Mayor Bernero, you know a guy who knows how the system works. He knows, what buttons to push and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, do you believe there's a hunger now for outsiders, people who aren't career politicians?
Well, there does seem to be. This Jim Trebelka. People just seem to come to the point now where the tempers are just boiling over as it relates to politicians and the status quo and all the things that we've talked about here. So I think Snyder probably really touched a nerve in some of the things that he had to say during his primary campaign in terms of the fact that he has run businesses, the fact that he really wants to clean up the political mess that's here in Lansing. Remains to be seen whether he can do that, of course. But I think that touched a nerve. I voted for him, personally.
For Snyder?
Yeah, I did. I was impressed with Mr. Hoekstra, but I'm not a conservative. I view myself as more of a moderate, and Snyder was more aligned with my beliefs than Mr. Hoekstra was.
And when Rick Snyder was in the studio here with us, I can't remember who was here that day, but what were your thoughts on Rick Snyder? Like you say, you can watch him in the commercials, listen on the radio, see him in print and all that. When he's standing right there, you get a chance to talk to him also off the air.
Gary Doty, I was here that day, and I was impressed with Rick. one comment that Peggy made more than once was when we asked Rick a question, he looked you straight in the eye and answered it straightforwardly. And I mentioned earlier that I voted for Rick, so I kind of let the cat out of the bag, I guess. But I didn't make that decision until I walked into the voting booth. And for me, it came down to Pete Hoekstra and Rick Snyder. And I was impressed with Bouchard early on. I really liked him. I think all of them were very, very good. And for me, I think it came down to Rick that, he is going to have some challenges when he takes office, like where's the bathroom. But he has no baggage. I think the bottleneck the last 2 years on the budget for the state of Michigan, I think nobody's mad at Rick. He's not going to come in there and have to overcome historically maybe what has went on in the past. And I think I'm hopeful that the Democrats and the Republicans both will be able to reach across the aisle and work with people initially and hopefully make more progress than maybe one of the other candidates would have coming in as a previous office holder and a Republican.
Yeah, and I think people are at the point where maybe they're going to be a little bit more patient with inexperience than they are with the status quo and the political wrangling that goes on. I was surprised that Mr. Hoekstra only won 10 counties in the entire state. That really did surprise me. I thought that he would be much stronger in western and northern Michigan than he was.
So you two are willing to take a risk on someone that you don't know their voting record in the hopes that that fresh start will sort of carry over to all the new legislators we're going to have too.
I think that's part of it, and I think the business background, like it's been talked about here this morning, that someone has got to look at state government, our government, as from a business perspective, if we're going to grow jobs, create jobs in Michigan. So I'm hopeful that Rick can do that.
And do remember what he said. I mean, he said that he was going to hold his departments, the executive side of this thing, accountable for what they add in terms of value to the people that are paying the taxes. So, I mean, he gets that. And because he was an executive, he's going to surround himself with the necessary people, or at least this would be my thinking of what he would do, that can shepherd things through and build the bridges that need to be built in the legislature to get things done. That would be my thing. And what he said this morning was so important. He says, I'm not going to rest until I actually am able to add the value as the governor, because this is just preliminary stuff that he's going through. So that you can see his perspective on things. And it's a lot more refreshing than a career politician who may know where the bathroom is, but he's dodging and bopping and weaving and doing all of that stuff, So it's going to be a very interesting contrast for the next 2 months as we go to vote.
Was the Doty family ticket split? Actually,
I didn't say who.
Actually, we talked about that for 2-3 days before the election, and both of us decided to do our own thing, and we did split. We did.
I agree with that. I was with Gary. I mean, I was undecided as I drove up to the polls, and I happened to be speaking with him on the phone. And I said, I still don't know what I'm going to do.
You really drove there and walked in undecided.
Yeah, I was
Isn't
torn.
that astonishing?
I was torn. I thought Rick Snyder has a lot going for him. I really, really liked him. I am a conservative, so Pete Hoekstra had that going for me. But the business perspective, I think this is going to be our opportunity to see if a businessman can govern. And I'm real excited about Rick Snyder having that opportunity.
Well, you're all business owners. Is that appealing to you to have one of your own?
Well, the business aspect, this is Scott Danek, the business aspect is definitely appealing. And I know that the criticism is going to be initially, and Bernero mentioned what his strategy is going to be this morning and painting him as just an executive and a corporate person as if that's a bad thing. But leadership's leadership. And I think that Granholm sort of took, she has said she feels one of her weaknesses was her lack of experience. But leadership's leadership. I mean, you can either lead or you can't. And I think that if Snyder's able to lead, and he's proven he's able to lead at the corporate level, if he's able to lead at the government level, then he should do okay.